The next day, he's still hung up on last night's letter when the knight shows up. The guy drops to his knees and spills that Tyre kicked the bucket last night. Apparently, she took a tumble from her balcony, and there weren't any signs of a struggle, and the guards swear they didn't see anyone come or go. The boy's visibly bummed out and tells the knight to have the head servant handle the situation. Once the knight had left the room, our hero called the assassin lady back, and she showed up right on cue. She quickly spilled the beans that the servant had killed herself the moment she laid eyes on her. The boy couldn't hide his disappointment, muttering that he figured she'd know how to handle such things. The lady countered, saying she had tied Tyre with ropes up tight, but the wily servant had stashed poison in her fake tooth, and once she died out of poison, she threw the servant from the balcony to make it look like an accident. Even though her interrogation had hit a dead end, she whipped out another note from her cleavage and revealed that this is what she found out in her apartment. With a sly grin, she points out that the sender called Tyre Big Sister and mentioned a seaside view a lot. She hints that there's a chance the third princess from Clearwater Port might be the one pulling the strings. She suspects Princess Garcia Wimbledon might be holding Tyre's family hostage, using her as a pawn to eliminate our hero. Judging by how Tyre chose to end things, it seems she was trained for years before being assigned here. The boy feels deeply disappointed that his own siblings are so quick to eliminate each other for the crown. Suddenly, the woman leans in close to our hero's ear and whispers that she has to go because someone is coming their way. The boy blushes a bit, maybe catching a peek of her assets straining against her shirt before she disappears into thin air. Just then, the old consul shows up with some good news. A bunch of folks have volunteered to take on the demons during the demon months. This puts a big grin on the prince's face, and he decides he needs to go see it all for himself. But before heading there, the old man genuinely asks if he really intends to have these regular folks go up against the demons. Once outside, our hero also feels bummed out and sees that the consultant's worries were legit. These people don't look like fighters. They seem more like street thugs. On the other hand, the knight is all gung-ho about how he picked these folks based on what our hero wanted. But looking at these poor souls with their frail bodies, it's clear this knight totally missed the mark. The prince just facepalms himself, and it seems like our hero expected a lot from people who barely scrape by. Even the consultant suggests considering other recruits instead of these commoners. But our hero seems dead set on using them anyway, as if he has cracked the code already. Our hero believes that it's all about people power when it comes to building a strong army, whether they're wielding medieval swords or modern tech. The knight suggests starting sword training tomorrow, but our hero waves it off. Instead, he tells the knight to group them up, then hits the jogging trail. He also tells him to bring that iron axe hunter from earlier in tow, and suggests the knight to sit tight and enjoy the show. By noon, the hunters joined our hero's cause. But the knight's not exactly thrilled with this new training approach. Coming from a family steeped in warrior tradition, he doesn't get why these folks are getting rewarded with eggs just for standing around all morning, especially since eggs are pricey as hell. Once again, our hero tells him to chill and enjoy the show. Like, he already knows you can't whip up a top-notch army in a few medieval months, and he is not after muscle-bound brutes who can tear enemies apart with their bare hands. All he wants is disciplined soldiers. To get results fast, he's using military techniques he learned back in college. He's seen how quickly people can unify under this method, and he is betting these folks will follow suit. After a while, the carriages show up and folks eagerly line up for their eggs. People still can't quite wrap their heads around the idea of eggs as rewards. The knight clangs his plate loudly to get everyone's attention and orders them to form 4 lines. He lays down the law that food will be handed out in order, and stragglers would wait till the end. There's a mix of nerves and compliance as everyone queues up. Meanwhile, the knight is still puzzled why the prince is bothering to teach these kinds of basic things to these people. Suddenly, the crowd erupts into murmurs and talks, chanting Iron Axe, who seems to have quite the reputation around these parts. The prince declares a break after lunch, followed by a visit to the guard barracks in town. Iron Axe is appointed as their captain, tasked with teaching everyone how to set up tents. As soon as our hero finishes speaking, there's a buzz of gossip about the prince putting someone like Iron Axe in charge of their platoon. To calm everyone down, he reminds them that Iron Axe isn't local, just like the witches that do not belong to Grey Castle. Our hero stresses that in Border Town, everyone's treated equally, no matter where they're from. As long as they're not criminals, they're welcome here. The prince unrolls a ridiculously long sheet, longer than your average grocery list, and tells the chief knight to pay more attention to these rules than to who gets to be captain. He stresses that everyone needs to memorize and stick to these rules if they want their usual egg during meals. The chief knight scratches his head at the idea of visiting Teacher Carl after dinner, wondering aloud how reading and writing will help fight demons. But the prince brushes off his concerns and says a well-educated army is always more effective. According to him, history has proven this point many times. Next up, we're at City Hall in Bordertown. There we see our hero stagger out of his room, still half asleep. Suddenly, Nightingale pops up out of nowhere and teases him about his newfound habit of sleeping a lot lately. It seems she has also helped herself by eating some of our hero's breakfast. Of course, the boy does not seem to be really happy to see her eating his breakfast and coming inside without his permission. He then starts wondering aloud if she was never taught to be more subtle around royalty. As he takes his seat, the lady adopts a respectful posture and asks if she's being polite enough. Then she casually mentions she knows the prince isn't into all that fancy, unnecessary politeness. The boy finds himself startled to see that she seems to know what he exactly prefers. He sighs and tells her to just eat the whole breakfast so he can at least ask for another serving. She dives into the food while the prince starts flipping through his new blueprints. The lady then curiously asks why he's been ordering so much ice-ons lately, because it's already dead of the winter, and if our hero wants to make his whiskey cool, he can simply put his drink outside. Seeing his wide-open order book, Prince Ronald realizes that she must have seen everything he has been ordering lately. So, he spills the beans that he's trying to make cheese, and to do that, he needs things to stay below freezing. While the girl praises our hero for his clever ideas, inside our hero's mind, we discover he just fed her a lie about making cheese, because he is making something even more confidential which he does not want to disclose to her, because he doesn't fully trust her like he does with Anna and Nana. He wants to gather more intel about her before revealing his true secrets. He is apparently focused on developing guns, which are easier to make than steam engines. He fears that if anyone discovers his methods, it could seriously derail his ambitious plans. Also, the ice-ons he ordered is basically known as saltpeter, a substance wealthy folks use to cool drinks in summer. And this name ice-ons is just a fancy name given by the nobles. But what's crucial is that saltpeter is a key ingredient in making gunpowder, adding another layer of secrecy to his activities. The boy then changes the conversation by asking if witches train assassins as well, aside from searching for the Holy Mountain. The lady mentions that they're a group of oddballs who came together because of their dream of finding the Holy Mountain, and she only joined the Witch Cooperation Association about 2 years ago. Hearing this, the boy asks if she worked for someone else before joining the association, and wonders if there are people who accept witches. Putting down her plate, the lady laughs at the idea, calling it ridiculous. Sadly, she reveals that if her previous owner had known she had become a witch, he wouldn't have let her through the front door. Furthermore, she admits that if she hadn't been useful to him later on, he would have disposed of her quietly and quickly. The boy becomes more curious and demands further explanation about her past, but the lady decides to stay silent, promising a detailed account when the time is right. She also reassures him not to sweat it, mentioning she's been free for the last 5 years and has no plans to be anyone's pawn. The boy stays quiet, looking kinda down, and 5 days breeze by since that chat. Out in the courtyard, we see our hero has finally finished his first gun after tackling loads of production hiccups, and he is thrilled to keep this beauty all to himself. One big reason he's been working on steam engines was to churn out guns in bulk. So, he had to nail a prototype first before ramping up production. But at this rate, he worries he'll only crank out 4 of these bad boys by the month of demons. Meanwhile, the knight's scratching his head over how these supposed muskets will help in fighting demons. The boy just tells him to round up the village's top hunters and form a killer squad to wield these weapons. But the prince finds himself completely creeped out when the knight suggests using patrol guards instead of hunters. Well, looking back at those soldiers, it seems our hero's reluctance to entrust these guns to these puny frail patrol guards is indeed justifiable. In the dark tunnels beneath Roland Castle, a few soldiers are marching through the tunnels. Suddenly, one of them leaps into the air and attacks another soldier. The Scarface soldier tells this thin mustache to surrender or face the same fate as his friend Greymut. As the thin mustache soldier recalls his fallen friend, he becomes even more riled up, vowing never to let these hooligans set foot in the castle. With a surge of strength, he flings the scar-faced man back, causing his sword to fly off. Thin Mustache then readies his own sword and thrusts it into the left shoulder of Scarface, declaring that, "This is for Greymut." As he bleeds, Scarface scoffs, amazed that an ordinary guard patrol like the thin mustache soldier could hurt him. The thin mustache gets annoyed upon hearing this, and makes it abundantly clear that while Scarface was wasting time gambling and sleeping in pubs, he and his friends were training every day to protect their hometown. He swears he won't let Longsong and his partners disrupt their village's peace. As the thin mustache leaps to finish off his opponent, another cocky guy joins the fray and stabs him right in the chest. The poor guy writhes in pain from the dagger wound and collapses to the ground. Meanwhile, the other intruders stand over him confidently. Surprisingly, the thin mustache manages to pull the dagger out of his chest, despite the agony, and in a swift move, he throws it toward a nearby torch. The dagger shatters the torch, extinguishing the flame and plunging the area into darkness. Up in the castle's food storage, the thin mustache hides himself in one of the bins. He's certain these infiltrators are here to attack the food supplies. If they succeed in spoiling all the food, the border town will have no choice but to evacuate to Longsong Fortress. The soldier starts feeling disappointed in himself for not being able to protect a vital food bank while their prince is busting his butt for this town's progress. All of a sudden, his face goes terrified as the door behind him swings open, revealing those rowdy soldiers once again. One of the intruders grabs the soldier by the collar and throws him to the ground, telling him to quit running and surrender to Duke Ryan's demands. In case you forgot who Duke Ryan is, he's that white-haired guy who doesn't want our hero anywhere near his territory. The soldier stands his ground despite the threat, boldly stating that his prince will definitely foil Duke Ryan's plans. The intruders just scoff at the idea, laughing off the prince's abilities. Then, the leader tells his lackeys to take out the soldier and mess up the food while they're at it. Without hesitation, a lackey smacks the thin mustache guy hard on the head. Before losing his consciousness, the poor soldier wonders if this is how he will meet his end. But it seems fate has other plans, as Nightingale suddenly arrives on the scene. She questions the intruders if they're enjoying themselves in someone else's territory, but warns them their party is about to get shut down real quick. The intruders demand to know who she thinks she is. Nightingale coolly replies she's just a local from the border town. She questions why these clowns are here and suggests they look like sewer rats creeping out of the drains. Looks like those intruders do not realize how deep in shit they are, and their leader tells his crew to just take down this mysterious lady. But she just smiles, and in a flash, she swings her hand, and suddenly bodies are hitting the floor. Our soldier watches with bleary eyes as this mystery person swiftly takes out the intruders. Before he can even figure out who she is, he drifts off into unconsciousness. The next day rolls around, and we find the intruders' bodies scattered in the food storage. The knight inspecting the scene is scratching his head. He's trying to piece together who could have taken out these guys. He knows the thin mustache guy couldn't have done it with his injuries. The most likely scenario is some outsider jumped in without needing any backup. Their moves were so slick, the enemies didn't stand a chance. And there's no mess left behind. No blood or barrels knocked over. Not even a scratch in the place. Suddenly, he's thinking there must be someone with serious sword skills around. He starts feeling proud of his clan's history and their knack for knightly arts. The soldier gives his report. The autopsies are done, and they've identified the corpses. 8 were from our town's guard, and 1's still a mystery. The chief knight asks about the survivors. The soldier says Captain Brian's getting special healing, but Scarface got tossed in the dungeon and locked up. The knight tells the soldier to wake Scarface pronto for interrogation. Meanwhile, the prince feels annoyed that he hasn't made any real progress yet, and these guys are already trying to bring him down. But he's thankful Nightingale swooped in and saved the day. Nightingale reassures him that those intruders couldn't have gotten to him anyway, with Anna sleeping right under his floor. That's when the prince gets an idea. He proposes that Nightingale become his secret bodyguard, offering her a gig that pays better than Anna's. A sweet place to live with a garden, 2 days off each week, and paid vacations. But even with all those tempting perks, she politely turns down his offer, explaining she can't leave the association and her friends there. The prince suggests bringing everyone to town since there's plenty of space after the construction. He assures her there won't be any discrimination, and they can live freely. Once again, she declines, saying she'll think about it in the future, leaving the prince feeling a bit awkward after being turned down. Moving on, the boy asks if she safely sent Nana back home after healing the soldiers. She confirms she did, mentioning Nana was scared when she saw the injured soldiers. But that's not surprising. Given her experience is mostly patching up chickens, healing a person covered in wounds was understandably terrifying for her. Returning to the conversation, the boy asks her if she has figured out which of his siblings might be behind this infiltration. The lady points out that this time it wasn't one of his siblings behind the infiltration. The culprits bribed the patrol guards of the border town. Their plan was so sloppy they left 2 witnesses alive who didn't even have the guts to kill themselves before getting caught. She assures him they'll figure it out soon, since the chief knight is already grilling one of the infiltrators. She also mentions these guys were surprisingly wimpy and tearful compared to the 3rd princess's infiltrator. While everything is peaceful outside the castle, we see our hero strolls alongside the chief knight, heading to visit the thin mustache soldier. When the soldier spots the prince in the room, he's totally thrown and jumps in his bed. The prince starts off by praising Brian for his guts and the fight he put up. But Brian gets emotional, saying it was his buddy who really stepped up, the true hero who sacrificed his life. But the prince reassures the soldier, saying his friend's funeral will give him the recognition he deserves for his bravery. As for Scarface, he's getting the full punishment. He's set to hang in 3 days, and the prince hopes Brian will be well enough to see it happen. Thin Mustache then mentions Scarface supposedly has noble blood, hinting it might stir up trouble with Longsong Fortress. The prince brushes it off, explaining Scarface might have noble lineage from the Elk family, but he's got no titles or land. Besides, he tried to burn down all of Bordertown's food, causing a huge mess that can't just be ignored. With reassurances that someone else will handle patrols, the prince tells Thin Mustache to rest up. In the coming month of demons, he promises to honor him as a brave knight of the prince.